सदफ,
हाँ जी सर।
आज बड़ा स्पेशल एपिसोड होने वाला है।
आज हम मोमो और चाय साथ में खाएंगे पिएंगे, मतलब चाय में मोमो डुबा डुबा खाएंगे।
क्या बात कर रहे हो? आज हम आज हम होटल्स के बारे में बात करेंगे। तो होटल्स में मोमोज नहीं होते, वहां पे डिमसम्स मिलते हैं।
नाइस। तो हम डिमसम को चाय में डुबा खाएंगे।
अरे नहीं नहीं भाई, नहीं नहीं
तो
प्लीज।
स्पेशल केड़ा स्पेशल?
आज we have our 52nd episode, which means we finished one whole year with each other, the team
वाह,
and listeners. Uh, yeah, so good occasion to have somebody special on the show.
एक साल हो भी गए?
हम्म।
ले जो पता भी नहीं चला, मतलब जैसे तो मतलब अभी कल की तो बात है, हम बिल्कुल एपिसोड 1 रिकॉर्ड कर रहे थे, साल भर हो गए।
बिल्कुल, थोड़ा ज्यादा
पता
हो
ही
रहा
नहीं
है,
चली।
थोड़ा ज्यादा हो गया। Anyway, today we have Diwan Gautam Anand on the show to celebrate this lovely occasion. I I know you have a lot of things to discuss and ask him, but if I take the liberty of introducing him first.
शॉर्ट एंड स्वीट ही रखना, बिकॉज वो बहुत बड़ा हो जाता है।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, शॉर्ट एंड स्वीट ही रखेंगे।
नाम भी इतना लंबा है,
हम्म।
दिवान गौतम आनंद, and I have a तकल्लुस called शरर. By the time I say that I explain my name, सब सो जाते हैं।
तखल्लुस क्या है आपका दीवान साहब?
शरर।
शरर। ओ वाह,
वाह,
दीवान गौतम आनंद शरर।
लवली।
सब सो जाते हैं। चलो
आपको कुछ शायरी वायरी करनी है सदफ आज?
अरे दीवान साहब से शायरी सुनेंगे आज तो। आज सारी मतलब अलग अलग लैंग्वेज, मुख्तलिफ लैंग्वेजेस में सुनेंगे, जबान में सुनेंगे, पंजाबी में भी, थोड़ी सी उर्दू, हिंदी। दीवान साहब डोगरी बोल लेते हैं आप?
नहीं, I am पंजाबी, I am not.
अच्छा, सिर्फ पंजाबी? तो हम पंजाबी और उर्दू में सुनेंगे हम वैसे।
I am पंजाबी, I am not.
इंग्लिश पोएट्री।
अच्छा, पहले हमारे लिसनर्स के लिए इंट्रोड्यूस कर देते हैं।
हाँ, पहले वो कर लिया।
So Diwan Gautam ji is a veteran hotelier. He has worked with ITC Hotels for the last 40 years in leadership positions, and he has an excellent understanding of North Indian cuisine. Actually, all cuisine, but हम थोड़ा North Indian cuisine पे focus करेंगे आज. He's also incubated many popular restaurants and conceptualized brands like Royal Vega or Timo, Dakshin, and my favorite, and which is his favorite as well, the Delhi Pavilion in Saket Sheraton. So we'll be talking about Delhi Pavilion later in this chat, but really it's a huge honor to have you on the show.
वेलकम दीवान साहब। मतलब
आदेश आपकी,
अर्चित,
अच्छा किया आपने शॉर्ट एंड
अर्चित,
स्वीट ही कर दिया, नहीं तो बहुत लंबा हो जाता है।
हमने एपिसोड भी करना ना।
आप बोलिए।
हाँ, अच्छा, पहले तो मैं आपके जो शरर है उसका तखल्लुस का मतलब जानना चाहूंगा।
उसका मतलब है कि अगर आप हमारे साथ रहेंगे तो आप जल जाएंगे।
अच्छा।
उसका मतलब होता है स्पा।
हाँ,
शरारा सुना है आपने?
जी जी जी
जी।
इसके पीछे आप घूमते रहते हैं।
हाँ,
शरारा, समझ गए?
शरारा।
आपने शरारा और आप हो गए गरारा।
गरारा होगा
तो
उसके बाद।
शरर जो है वो शरारा का एक डेरिवेटिव है। सो व्हेन यू से
ओ,
ये बहुत बेगम थी हमारी, बहुत शरारा पहन के घूम रही थी, चमक रही
हाँ
थी, शी वाज स्पार्कलिंग।
हाँ,
सो द वर्ड
इंटरेस्टिंग।
शरर एक्चुअली मींस स्पार्क।
स्पार्क, नाइस। दैट्स अ ब्यूटीफुल तखल्लुस टू हैव।
उसको
मुझे भी
नाम आप
तखल्लुस
ऐसे
चाहिए।
रखें तो फिर वो अंग्रेजी में एक बहुत अच्छी कहावत है, assumptions become a self-fulfilling prophecy।
हाँ।
उसका मतलब इतना बड़ा नाम लिख दिया तो हमें कोई पूछता ही नहीं क्या नाम है जी आपका। हम दीवान गौतम आनंद शरर। ओके सर, विल सी यू नेक्स्ट ईयर। ठीक है।
नहीं, हम तो इस साल ही देखेंगे। और तो इंटरेस्टिंगली ना, मतलब ऑफ कोर्स फूड इंडस्ट्री में एवरीबॉडी नोज अबाउट यू। जो नहीं जानते हैं वो पत्थर के नीचे रहते हैं, मतलब, और या फिर कुएं में रहते हैं, ऐसा कुछ होगा उनके साथ। बट व्हाट आई एम जेन्युइनली इंटरेस्टेड आल्सो इन नोइंग इज हाउ डिड यू डिसाइड लाइक अ होटल इंडस्ट्री और हॉस्पिटैलिटी, और स्पेशली मेरा असम्पशन है कि जिस टाइम पे आप इस इंडस्ट्री को चुन रहे थे या फिर ये इंडस्ट्री आपको चुन रही थी, उस टाइम पर अमूमन मतलब एक अदद लोग ही होंगे, जितने आज आ चुके हैं उतने शायद उस जमाने में नहीं होंगे। तो आई एम वेरी इंटरेस्टेड कि हाउ डिड यू एंटर इन दिस ब्यूटीफुल वर्ल्ड ऑफ फूड?
It's very simple. My parents are refugees. Okay, they arrived in Delhi, in India, or Delhi, in the in the late 40s. Okay, and set up shop, and then they were fortunate because they had education and so on and so forth. And they made a home in Nizamuddin. It became a resettlement colony.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was the rehabilitation commissioner, so he managed to get himself a substantial, generous plot of land overlooking Khan Khana tomb, and and flanking the dargah of Hazrat Nizamuddin and Humayun's tomb. So अच्छा माहौल था. उन्होंने अपना जैसे लाहौर में घर था वैसे बना लिया, लॉन वॉन भी लगा लिए, गाड़ियों की जगह भी बना ली, मतलब कि अच्छी तरह उन्होंने, और डबल हाइट रूम जो बनवाए. आजकल तो डबल हाइट नहीं, पर उस जमाने के लिए अच्छा होता था. और हमारे फादर इंजीनियर थे. ही वाज एन इंजीनियर, बट ही वाज अ रोल्स रॉयस ट्रेन्ड इंजीनियर, एंड ही सेट अप he hated Simla. So he told his father that, भैया आप रहिए, हम तो जा रहे हैं. So he set up a small automobile engineering company called Allen Berries in Connaught Circus, Connaught Place actually. It was quite a advanced engineering. My mother was an educator. So there was a very famous school called Mrs. Gauba's School, Elizabeth Gauba's School. So one of the things that my parents agreed on when they got married is that they would educate their children, irrespective of their financial situation, which was, precarious those days. So I was promptly sent to Mrs. Gauba's School, naturally, because my mother was teaching there, and then went to modern school, which is an extension of Mrs. Gauba's School, expensive school. And then I went to St. Stephen's College.
Wow.
To do my history. Yeah, I did my history honors, and I was a nice student. I was obedient. And I used to go to classes, and they said you should join the IES, and we'll groom you and we'll give you tutorials. In the meanwhile, my father died, or passed away, because I think he had too much of a good life. He used to drink too much, he used to smoke too much. So, he just died young. Right. So my mother was in a quandary, and Ramesh Sareen, who was deputy chairman of ITC, was her kid cousin. So he came calling on her, and he said, is there something I can do? So promptly my mother said, get Gautam a job. He's finished his college and he wants to do this and that. In the meanwhile, I got a job with the US Library of Congress. English skills अच्छे थे हमारे, थोड़े बोल लेते थे, ग्रामर भी ठीक थी, मदर टीचर है तो फिर ऐसे ही होगा ना. So हमें वहाँ मिल गई at a princely sum, अच्छे पैसे मिलते थे, और father was an engineer, so he left many cars for us, you see, so petrol wasn't so expensive. But Ramesh Sareen said that, he called me, he says, Gautam, would you like to learn, why don't you learn Italian and Japanese? So I said, well, that's a very lofty idea. So out flew the idea of struggling for the IFS. We are impatient people. He said, you start learning English or Japanese in Italy, we'll send you. You come for interview, or so on and so forth. I reluctantly left my very expensive paid job at the Library of Congress, went for an interview, and half the panel there was from St. Stephen's and Modern School. Simple as that. So when I walked in, and I spoke well, I looked decent, I had no accent, no Punjabi accent, which is unusual, I suppose. He said, Gautam, when can you join? So I said, well, I said, what about going to Japan? He said, no, we have decided to send you to Cornell. So I said,
wow.
So I got into ITC Hotels as a management trainee. They took a group of us, sent us to Cornell. That was an investment that the company made in me, all right? And by default, so therefore a history graduate, and don't ask me my marks, because I got a second division, but the fact that I am a history honors student and from St. Stephen's College certainly helped matter. And so I got myself into ITC, and they were at that juncture not besotted by taking people from culinary schools.
Sure.
Because उनकी pedigree तो नहीं थी ना hotels की.
हाँ जी.
Their pedigree was management pupil. The management pupil came from my kind of background. See, third, fourth generation educated people. So I found myself getting a US visa and flying for some 60 hours to reach Cornell, and came back, got posted, and the rest, as they say, is history. Okay, so do I regret it? Not at all. Would I have joined the IFS or IS? Certainly not. Would I have chosen some other industry? Wow. And you're right, at my juncture in life, when I passed out from college, this was 78, there were very few jobs, all right? The so-called multinationals were exiting India. The estate was an option. ITC was making this fantastic transition from being a BAT-owned company to an Indian-owned company. And, there I was.
Lovely.
How did you develop Sorry, I just had a follow-up question. How did you develop in the food space? Hotel industry is vast.
So it's very simple. So by default, I got posted into food and beverage. So my first position was, we didn't have so many hotels, but we had a hotel in Chennai, Madras it was called. It was called ITC Chola.
Chola.
The Welcome Group Chola. Okay.
Yeah.
I got posted there, and they had the Pakistani cricket team staying there. So I was sent on a state of emergency, right? And I was told that, do we look after breakfast service? And now you can imagine, my waiting skills are very poor, so I may have dropped all kinds of things into people's family jewels. My mind and all that, I managed to, sort of managed. And I was persuasive, and a lot of our staff was Anglo-Indian those days. And, language skills helped. They sort of took to me. I wasn't parochial. I learned a little bit of the Tamil language. English I could speak well. Hindi, I kept my mouth shut. Or Hindustani, as we were taught. So, by default, they said you're a food and beverage guy.
Wow.
All right. Now, I managed. I did pretty well actually. But the guy who really changed my life was I find him my culinary guru. His name was Habib Rahman. Okay, so my encounter with Habib Rahman, or Mr. Rahman, I respectfully call, took place. He sort of liked my academic understanding of food, because हम नहीं जानते थे, unlike Sadaf, पका हुआ खाना हम नहीं पका सकते, वो भी नहीं पका सकते.
Same here. मैं भी से बातें करता हूँ.
So we were both, but we loved food. So we used to spend a lot of time discussing it. And we did not have the proficiency of cooking, but we understood the science and the technique. He belonged to Hyderabad. Okay. I had roots in Delhi, right? I was aware of my ancestry, all right? He liked the fact that I came from a particular background with education behind me for several generations. And the Diwan, by the way, is not, I'm not being pompous. It was actually the Diwans of Multan were hereditary rulers of a particular gate in Multan. Okay. And when Maharaja Ranjit Singh annexed Multan from the Duranis, he reinstated the Diwan, and then the government of India, after my grandfather did a fabulous job in rehabilitation, said, "Bhi aap the Diwan ka title use kar sakte hain."
Wow.
तो उसमें तो उनको अच्छा लगा, प्लस हम बोल लेते हैं थोड़ी हिंदुस्तानी, तो उसमें उन्होंने हमें सिखाया कि दीवान शौक का आलम तो देखिए. ये हमारे ग्रैंडफादर ने लिखा कि दीवान शौक का आलम तो देखिए, हर दौर में मंजिल से आगे तक.
Wow.
He was speaking about his sons and their sons, to say that look at the the passion of the Diwan, that 60th generation has outclassed each other. Diwan shauq ka alam to dekhe कि हर दौर में मंजिल से, and the house, the family house, was called Diwan Manzil.
Wow. In Multan itself?
In Multan, and I know people who know that house well. Okay? I still in touch with many Multanis who keep calling me, and they speak in a complicated language. But so yes, that's what happened. So he loved this discussion, and we were at that time being hegemonized by a lot of cooks from Lucknow. नाक से बोलते हैं
हाँ, that's why it's called Lucknow.
ये माइनॉरिटी थे, उन्होंने कहा यार हमको बचाओ, तुम एक हमको एलाई मिल एक गौतम आनंद हमको एलाई मिल गया, किधर आओ तुम हमारे साथ। तो उसमें हम समझ गए कि यार इनको भी एलाई चाहिए, हम भी थोड़ा इनसे सीखेंगे। वो जानकार आदमी थे, very passionate about food, and so our evenings or mornings spent together discussing. And he brought a lot of the Deccan experience into food.
Nice.
And the disintegration or the destruction of Delhi as a consequences of whatever reason. There were two great beneficiaries of the destruction of Delhi. One was Hyderabad, the other one was Lucknow. Okay, so यहाँ के जितने academics थे वहाँ भाग गए, यहाँ पर तो it became unfortunately a cesspool for all the losers, isn't it? And that is why it was not annexed by any East India company. It was not important enough, right? It was important enough to be the capital of India for 800 years, but not important enough for the East India Company, because सब तो ले गया यहाँ से लूट के। तो हैदराबाद का पर्सपेक्टिव उनसे हमने समझा कि क्या होता है क्या। तो ये सब भी एक दिन हम एक हैदराबादी रेस्टोरेंट बनाएंगे तुम्हारे साथ, तुम सीख लो थोड़ा बहुत। और he posted me to Hyderabad. So I went as a general manager at some young age, at 32, 33, and actually he used to come every week, and then he would give me a hard time. हलीम कैसे बना, किसने बनाया, हरीस कैसे बना, ये बिरयानी क्या है, इसमें चावल क्या है, प्लांट्स कैसे होते हैं, गोश्त का क्या होगा, हमको क्या क्या नहीं खिलाया, सदा अडर्स, भेजा, रवान, यानी कहाँ कहाँ के हम पंजाबी लोग हैं, खा लेते हैं गुर्दा खा, लेकिन वो नहीं खाते हुए हम। So yes, I think I would he actually enlightened, and he gave me, and I must confess that they gave me the rope to go and make a lot of mistakes, and then because I was of a scientific bent of mind, I understood the chemical reactions of what ingredients can do to each other.
Nice. Before I jump to next thing, and basis what you are mentioning, I just want to ask Archit. Archit, have you ever had tongue? ज़बान खाया कभी आपने?
मैंने खाया एक बार.
Oh.
Yeah, I think it was deep fried, तो उसका कुछ ज़्यादा taste नहीं था, तो बस crisp था बहुत.
I like it actually.
Off the record, I love it. अच्छा होता है रे.
मजा आता है
क्या? एक उसमें क्या होता है, एक मिस्किन निहारी होती है. मिस्किन का मतलब गरीबों की निहारी, और एक होती है रईसों की. ठीक है. तो अगर हैदराबाद में रईसों की निहारी खाना चाहो तो वो आपको 2 जवान डाल दें. अच्छा. जवान इज अ डेलिकेसी.
डेलिकेसी.
और जो मिस्किन होते हैं वो ऑफल्स खाते हैं ना, करोड़े ये वो. आप करोड़े कहते हैं, हम करोड़े कहते हैं, आप पाया कहते हैं. तो है, तो ये हमको वहां से थोड़ा अंडरस्टैंड किया. तो इट इज कॉन्ट्रेरियन टू द नॉर्थ. उनका जो पाया होता है और हमारी जो निहारी होती है वो अलग होती है. तो समझ हो गए. लेकिन
so you said very interesting thing about Delhi and किस तरीके से you were growing up in Delhi as well. तो दिल्ली बोलते हैं, दिल्ली नहीं बोलेंगे, दिल्ली बोलते हैं. तो अब आपने बोला कि दिल्ली जो है डिवीजन भी हुआ है दिल्ली का, और दिल्ली में काफी चीजें आई हैं, गई हैं. तो somebody like you who have grown up in Delhi, if I may call you a Dilli wala, a Dilli boy.
I am Dahelvi.
You're Dahelvi, even awesome.
I'm not Dahelvi.
So as a Dahelvi.
No, I am not Dahelvi. Please, that is Sadia and the others, and they'll kill me for this.
The family.
Dahelvi.
What is the difference?
Oh, Navi. What is Navi?
Expression ka difference.
Acha.
But it's unique to me.
So Dahel Navi.
You're right.
So as Dahel Navi.
Dahel Navi.
Navi. Oh, this is a new term for me, I think. तो एज अ दहलवी क्या कुछ बदला है फ्रॉम पहले? पता ना, स्पीकिंग अच्छी तरह से सेम थिंग कि दिल्ली, मैं पिछले 11 साल से हूँ दिल्ली में, तो उस तरीके से मैं आई स्टिल डोंट कॉल माई सेल्फ दिल्ली वाला पर से, लेकिन पिछले 10 साल में ही बहुत खाना मेरे सामने चेंज हुआ है। मोमो आ गए, उसके बाद मोमो का तंदूरी मोमो हो गया है, फिर इस तरीके से काफी अलग अलग किस्म किस्म के खाने भी आए हैं। तो आपके जमाने में, मतलब यू हैव सीन लाइक जनरेशन, नॉट आपके जमाने में, जनरेशंस ऑफ फूड यू हैव कंट्रीब्यूटेड इन दैट स्पेस एज वेल एज स्पेक्टेटर भी आपने उस खाने को देखा है। तो दिल्ली, इफ यू कैन लाइक गिव मी अ ओवरव्यू कि ऐसा हुआ करता था और अब ये ऐसा है, सो हाउ वुड यू डिफाइन दिल्ली खाना और दिल्ली का जो चेंज हुआ है खाने के मामले में?
अब ऐसा है कि हमने कभी किसी प्रिज्म से नहीं देखा, क्योंकि हम निजामुद्दीन के हैं, हम तो एक होल्डर दिल्ली से हैं। तो शाहजहानाबाद है वो तो 400 साल पुराना है, ठीक है। तो निजामुद्दीन है, जो मेहरौली है, ये 800 साल हम जानते हैं। और हम वहाँ पर, हमें शौक होता है खाने वाने का, चाराने का, हमको भी सीखा हुआ मिलता था। और बड़े मियाँ जो थे वो बड़े भी खिला देते थे, बड़े मियाँ भी खिला देते थे। हमारे घर में जानते थे, जाते हैं वहाँ पर, खा के आते हैं, वो भी मंगा लेते थे। तो आई अंडरस्टूड कि भी बहुत अच्छा खाना है, लेकिन याद रखो कि जो फूड दैट इज ऑन द स्ट्रीट विल रिमेन ऑन द स्ट्रीट। तो in the Holocaust of partition, and I suspect I had no Holocaust. I mean, I was very happy, born in much later. My parents were, but in the Holocaust of arrivals and departures, भाई कई गए और कई आए, ठीक है। जो गए वो ले गए, जो आए वो लेके आए, लेकिन जो स्ट्रीट में खाना था वो स्ट्रीट पे ही रहा। वो बड़े मियाँ नहीं गए बंटवारे में, वो तो यहीं रह गए। रईस लोग गए, रईस लोग आए, ठीक है। तो वो जो आपका खाना है, जो हिंदुस्तान का खाना है, जो दिल्ली का खाना है, in spite of these two great centers, post all the aggression from wherever, of Lucknow and of Hyderabad, which were the beneficiaries of all your academia, and the food remained on the streets. वो तो वही रहा, ठीक है। तो आज आपको स्ट्रीट में, चाहे आप निजामुद्दीन जाए, साकेत जाए, आपको ढूंढना, आप चिराग के नीचे ढूंढेंगे तो मिल जाएगा, वो तो वही बना रहा है। वो बड़े मियाँ तो चले गए, उनका इंतकाल हो गया, उसके छोटे मियाँ आ गए, वही माहीन के मियाँ बनाते हैं, प्याज व्याज डालते हैं, बड़े का छोटा सब पूछ लेते हैं भी कि आप छोटा खाएंगे कि बड़ा खाएंगे, तो कह देते हैं जिस दिन मूड होता है अभी तो खा लेते। तो ये तो हम जानते हैं। अब मुझे कहना कि भी हम, we only look at it from my prism, right? And because we are Punjabi Khatris, we love eating. My father would drive all of us to Meerut. There used to be this fantastic kebabchi in Jama Masjid. और हम नहीं जानते थे parochialism कि भी वहाँ ये है, उस मजहब के लोग रहते हैं, हमको किसी ने नहीं सिखाया। याद रखो, I am a child of partition. Our parents were refugees, and generationally we can trace our ancestry for 4,000-5,000 years. 4,000-5,000 years, मैं बता रहा हूँ तुम्हें। हम समझते हैं, सब जानते हैं उसके बारे में। पोरस का भी नाम जानते हैं, पुरुषोत्तम, अलेक्जेंडर पोरस की कहानी भी जानते हैं। बट वो बहुत खुश थे, वो अपने अपनी गाड़ी वाड़ी खरीदी, अपनी बच्चों को पढ़ा रहे, वो हमको ले गए पेरेंट, हमने वहां भी खा लिया। क्या बारीक, क्या माहीन, क्या क्वालिटी, क्या अरे क्या नरगिसी कोफ्ता भी खा लिया। ये सब खाना, और सब कहें हमें कि दिल्ली का तो खाना ही नहीं है भाई, आप लोगों ने तो बर्बाद कर दिया दिल्ली का खाना। तो कैसे बर्बाद किया? चने भटूरे, ये बटर चिकन, इतने उथे तुसी कर के, मतलब so but we were relentless in the sense that we kept pursuing, and remember that when you live in Nizamuddin, you cannot but be conscious of the bricks and the mortar and the construction and they're not all mausoleums. Sundar Bagh is not a mausoleum, it is a sarai. It is a sarai. What? हमारे पंजाबीज में एक ट्रेडिशन होती थी कि इनके जो कुक्स होते थे, दे वर बोटीज फ्रॉम कांगड़ा.
Okay.
They're Sharma, but let me tell you, let me shock you. They're all meat eaters.
Yeah, yeah.
ये बहुत बली वगैरह होती है उसकी. So our cook, boti cook, and not first generation, third, fourth generation. He used to make he used to do his own butchery. All right. And so हमने stratify किया. And then, fortunately I went to St. Stephen's, did my history. And I did medieval India. And I realized medieval India की भी दो phases हैं. Ancient हम नहीं समझते, हम जानते भी नहीं. And I have said so in the public forum. I don't know. I'm not patient enough to understand it. I find it confusing. So I recognize that there are 4 or 5 distinct eras for Delhi, and we must precisely, bring this to the public domain. Right. So I called it the pre-medieval and the post-medieval. So for me, the 800 years हो गया ना span. 400 साल में आप दिल्ली सल्तनत लगाइए, whether we like them or not like them, हकीकत है भाई हमारे सामने. यहाँ दफने हैं, रहे हैं, जुल्म किया है, निकाह किए हैं, शादी की है. In fact, I like Mohammed bin Tughlaq. He married a nice Punjabi woman. I'm very proud. हम तो बड़े खुश हुए सुन के यार, वो जरूरत होगी पंजाबी. तो हम समझ गए कि ये है, और पढ़ते रहे, सुनते रहे, और कुछ हमने भी सुनाया. हबीब रहमान को भी हम भी जानते हैं, हम भी जानते हैं, और हमारी पंजाबियों में काफिज होती. तो एक बहुत फेमस हुसैन होते थे जो वाज लाइक द पोएट लॉरिएट ऑफ द पंजाब. उनकी हुसैन की काफी में हमने एक बहुत अच्छा पंजाबी कपलेट है कि दुखा दी रोटी ते सूलियां दा सालन. He was being bullied by Akbar.
Okay.
Hussain, because he belonged to the other faith. He was being bullied by Akbar, Emperor Akbar. क्या तुम ये गड़बड़ मत करो. ये जो सूफी वगैरह होते हैं ये ठीक नहीं होते. So so he said then he wrote in Punjabi, and he wrote in whatever script, he said कि सालन. So I learned कि सालन जो है ये बड़ा 800 साल पुराना एक डिश है.
अच्छा.
पढ़ा हमने. दुखा दी रोटी सोलिया दा सालन. It means the bread of remorse, and sole means thorns, and a curry of thorns. So I understood कि सालन, तो हम उस पे लग गए, सालन के मगर पड़ जाओ, ये है क्या. उसके बाद Tughlaq Sahab, because he had married a nice Punjabi, which sort of biased me towards all his misdeeds, obviously introduced during his mad. So he introduced Khalia. और हिंदुस्तान ने क्या देन दी उन्हें, टर्मरिक की हल्दी. जहाँ से आए थे वहाँ हल्दी वल्दी कहाँ मिलती. So the preservative. So the reason that Khalia was formed because it had copious amounts of turmeric to carry. Tughlaq Sahab, because he wanted to go and set up a capital in the Deccan. You've heard that story, na?
Yeah.
तुगलकाबाद बना के चल पड़े, चलो यार. तो उसपे खलिया निकल आया. ठीक है. हमने कहा यार ये तो बहुत अच्छा एनालॉजी होगी, तो जिस पे टर्मरिक होगा वो खलिया हो. ठीक है. और कोरमा आप लोगों ने बनाया, कोरमे में टर्मरिक नहीं डालते अब, अपना होटली का मसाला. तो हमने कहा ये
आज डालते हैं, लेकिन अब तो टर्मरिक हर चीज में चले जाता है.
गलत काम. गलत काम है, बिकॉज उसकी जरूरत नहीं है. इतना फ्लेवर. आई टेल यू व्हाट माय रीजनिंग. The turmeric is also pungent, right? And so are our spices. नहीं, वो तो. Have you heard this Punjabi song? कल कितना गुजारियां.
कल कितना गुजारियां रात में.
कितना चंद कितना गुजारी. चंद मतलब where did you spend चंद्रमा. रात को कहाँ थे भाई आप. किसी और की बाहों में तो नहीं थे. कोठे पे कोठा. That means terrace on terrace. सुख दी तोरियां. So बात तो वही होगी ना. So I'm just saying कि अगर आप if you add terrace on terrace, add pungency to pungency, then the outcome is dangerous.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
all right. So that is what happened. I kept demystifying, understanding, and and experimenting. And fortunately, as I said, the hotel company gave me the opportunity of trying out these new experiments and sharpening our responses for the public.
Wow.
Without adding any biases, and and then of course guests like you to come into the blind tasting. I had an MF Hussain actually. Hussain Saab was my most critical customer.
Oh wow.
Wow.
He would come every week. He would khilao. So I said, देखिए आपके नाम पे हम कबाब बना रहे हैं, उसका नाम हम रख रहे हैं फिदा हुसैन कबाब. And he gave me the recipe also. अभी भी है वो. तो वो आते थे उनके साथ. So I had a little panel. Try करते रहते. I had a gentleman from Jamia Millia, Hussain Saab, and some of the others, which also helped ITC Foods to develop its own tasters group. And then I was involved in that.
Lovely.
So what happened was that, so I did not ignore the butter chicken because it was now being touted as this great destruction of 800 years of cuisine. I embraced it only because whoever made it was language deficient. Punjabis are language deficient. उनको क्या पंजाबी आती है या थोड़ी बहुत इंग्लिश आ जाती है, तो जिसने भी कहा होगा बटर चिकन, for a community which can't pronounce Saket, this is Saket, can't say support, so they can't say Maruti, they Maruti. Butter chicken.
That's a very unique take on butter chicken, if I can say.
It went all over the world.
Yeah.
It demystified. It flew.
Yeah.
And Air India was in the 60s flying with butter chicken and tandoori chicken. Wow. And let me tell you, Air India, and I wrote about it. I write for Upper Crust, where I said the most premium seats of the transcontinental aviation world was London, New York. And guess which was the carrier that was traveling first class passengers? Air India. Wow. And they were serving butter chicken and tandoori chicken, and it was flying off. Someone's again English. In the meanwhile, somebody came and realized कि ये लज़्ज़तुल ताम वगैरह उससे क्या होता है, वो तो सब पोटली वोटली लगाते थे हमारे लड़के, बताते नहीं थे, तो इधर उधर. So Mr. MDH fellow, another gentleman, went and branded it. He said, यार mystery बंद करो, ये मैं बनाता हूँ आपको गरम मसाला. Flying all over the world.
बहुत बढ़िया.
Thoughtless man. He combined everything. Didn't understand कि salad क्या होता है, korma क्या होता है. Didn't want to understand. He just made you one garam masala. Flying.
Wow.
Wow.
And that's how we got garam masala.
Huh?
And that's how we got garam masala.
So therefore, the expression, भाई गरम, आप आपके घर में भी देखेंगे, आपकी जो माँ है, वो अपना पोटली का मसाला कहती थी. हम मुल्तानी है, हमारा मुल्तानी को अलग मसाला होता है. So nobody used the word garam masala.
Correct.
It became a metaphor, but it was, because of the post-partition stress and the lack of groceries. So every community that came to Delhi brought their own grocery. The Central Oceans brought their own grocery. The Mughals brought their own grocery. The Punjabis also brought their own groceries. Then the recent entrants, Biharis and Uttarakhand or whatever they came, they also brought their own groceries. So they're all there. I mean, India today is at the cusp, or Delhi for me, is one of the most important eating destinations in the world, because the grocery that you can source in Delhi, you can't source from anywhere in the world. And you can source these groceries for 800 years.
Yeah. Fascinating. There's one commonality actually two commonalities between you and I. My father was also an engineer, been associated with Rolls-Royce for the past
There you are.
20 years. Yeah. And my family also came from undivided India, Lahore, in 1947. And which actually is a good segue to my next question for you. बटर चिकन तो सबने उसके बारे में सुना है, हमने बात भी करी है, बट और क्या इन्फ्लुएंस था रिफ्यूजीज का दिल्ली के क्यूजीन पे, स्पेशली रिफ्यूजीज कमिंग फ्रॉम नाउ पाकिस्तान और अनडिवाइडेड इंडिया?
एक तो आपका I just explained to you that so I will tell you what the Central Asians did to us. Pret a manger. Pret a manger, that means ready to eat food. If you look at the ready to eat breads and ready to eat, there was no culture here. We are victims of our jati and varna. We hate eating with other people.
Yeah.
Our Vedic ancestors taught us to eat alone, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So, but they came as bachelors. So they started communal eating, khao, pio, and who is going to cook? So all these naan bhais and beautiful breads that you get in Nizamuddin and wherever, all thanks to the Central Asian. The Mughals sort of arrived there, piggybacked and everything. They had lots of money in the bank, right? What did they contribute? I'm not very sure, but that's for another discussion. But a lot of things happened because of prosperity. And the building of Chandni Chowk, which prospered. It was the world's first luxury street.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the world's first luxury street. Can you imagine? And with the canal in the center and all the guilds. If you go to New York, you're amazed by those avenues and streets. That was Chandni Chowk. Everything. Kinari Bagh is tarah hoga. Ye apna anarkali aise hoga. Jewelry yahan milegi. Paranthe aise hogi. So everything is on a geographical plane. Anyway, so the Punjabis, they also added their groceries. And Punjabis are not a homogeneous community. We may have a shared ethnicity, right? We may have a common geography, but we are not a homogeneous community, And we brought our own. So, for instance, the Multanis brought their own. People who came from Jhang not only made Jhangpura, but also brought their own. People who came from Peshawar brought their own. After all, that dal makhani, तो बनाया उन्होंने गुजराल साहब ने, वो भी पशावर से आए थे ना, तो वो अपना ले आए, तो इमेंस कंट्रीब्यूशन. किशोरी लाल से उन्होंने अपने चने भटूरे शुरू कर दिए, पूरी ले आए, हलवे शुरू हो गए. And halwa is the Persian word for sweets, and there's a lot of Persian domination in parts of the Punjab. So, हम कहते हैं जैसे गोंदी हलवा, सोन हलवा. No, we started calling it, but they're actually mithas hai, mithe. So if you go to Persia, or if you have a Persian friend and you ask for halwa, they'll give you sweets.
Yeah.
So the Punjabis, I think, so I've told you that the biggest crossovers known to India, right, which went all over the world, and thanks to Air India and thanks to the diaspora, was Punjabi food, right?
Yeah.
And remember that, I don't know whether you do this, but in our home, we are taught bibi da pulao. हम बिरयानी नहीं खाते थे, हम नहीं जानते, हमारे कल्चर सेट में नहीं, लेकिन हम baby is in Punjabi means bebe, means mother. Bibi, biji, beji. So they're very fond of meat. They like goat, and they like cooking that stock, the soup, or yakni, as Sadaf would call it, and they make that pulao. So the pulao became very famous, except that you can't get pulao anywhere commercially. You get biryani, but that's another story. So I think the Punjabis dominated, and they're aggressive people. And remember that when they arrived in Delhi in the 60s or 50s, all the restaurants were serving chicken a la cave.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Gaylord, we were not born, but I was there. And so there was United Coffee House, there was Volga, there was Gaylord, there was Alps. The only exception, the only pioneering, paradigm buster was Qahwa, who also had chicken agar ke, but had outstanding chana bhatura, which they still serve, and tandoori chicken and so on and so forth. And the moti meher, which and the tandoor, and all this. And remember that they carried on the tradition started by the Central Asians, because now the refugees also came looking for communal kitchens. So in Nizamuddin, where I grew up, Shammi set up the communal tandoor.
Wow.
तो सबके पास कुक बुक नहीं होते थे ना, सब तो रह गए। तो कई फिर गंगाराम हमारा आ गया, चलो हम बच गए। हमारा शर्मा आ गया, वो बना लेता, तब बाकी रोटी वोटी कौन बनाए? तंदूर कहाँ है? तंदूर तो रह गए ना फिर। तो कम्युनल जो आपके तंदूर बने, वो they used to do you leave your bread with leave your atta with them, and they would cook. We would make the bread and leave it for you in a sense of proportion, and because they sat on thadas, platforms, and they were hearths. On the hearth, they would slow cook all their around, and he would sit cross-legged, and therefore the ready-to-eat foods tradition carried.
My grandfather was actually mentioning that Lahore के घर में दो तंदूर होते थे घर पे ही, और अब तो किसी के घर पे, अब तो हम हाई राइजेस में रहते हैं, अब तो तंदूर नहीं।
और I mean, between you and me, मेरा भी दिल करता है कौन बनाएगा यहाँ पर? Honest, वैसे तो मेरे घर में तो रोटी भी बनाना मुश्किल है। At that time, I think my grandparents tried. My grandmother tried tandoor लगा देंगे आप देखने, but then everything was available at Shami's. Or we used to have a very nice, it's still there by the way. His grandfather used to run they used to make khamiri roti in Nizamuddin Dargah. The pass ही उनकी दुकान है, Hazrat Nizamuddin. ये अच्छी तरह
khamiri Hussaini.
His so it's a बड़े अच्छे शरीफ लोग हैं, and so he used to make, at those days in the 60s, he used to make just khamiri roti. और उसका बहुत पुराना खमीर होता था. Okay, now we started making kofta and so on and so forth. And Shami kebab.
Is this Hussaini hotel?
This is Muhammad Talib. He's next to Ghalib Kebab Corner, who is the biggest fraud in the world.
No, I think
So when you enter a restaurant, see something signed by me.
Oh wow! At Ghalib. Oh, nice.
कबाब कॉर्नर के अंदर अगर आप राइट हैंड साइड वॉल पे जाएंगे तो हमने साइन करके दिया हुआ है, भाई इनसे हमने सीखा है इधर किसी कोफ्ता, और किसी जमाने में अच्छे होते, अब नहीं.
I think nice. Acha, before we go into break, and I am somebody who loves tandoor. I think tandoor is I don't have it in my house, but I think it's one of the most beautiful kitchen equipment, so to speak. But you said कि निजामुद्दीन में सांझा चूल्हा हुआ करता था. Would you recall कहाँ पर exactly ये लगता था? Communal kitchen.
G block में था हमारा, तो I think opposite G block. And ये वहाँ पर it was one of those plots allotted to a refugee who didn't claim it, right?
Okay.
So, and for some reason didn't claim it for 25-30 years. So, Shami, set up this little place there, and it became very popular. And if you look at old people who belong to Nizamuddin, the entire overall staff was eating.
Oh, nice.
The Royal Hotel had opened up at that time. And the staff used to stay in and all the chamaris used to come and eat there. We also used to pretend they were going out for dinner. So my father would he had a nice car. He had a, God bless him, a 1960s Mercedes, left-hand drive. So he would take out the car, and we used to tell our friends we're going out for dinner. And we would create a lot of neighbors' envy and all that, except that we used to land up at Shami's, sitting in the corner. Very delicious food.
Yeah.
And he would do, and that is where I learned to be maa chaddi. He would not yellow dal and all that. He used to do that little fry, dal fry, or whatever you call it. It's quite tasty, by the way. He would do, if you give him eggs, he would make ande ki bhujia. He did not cook meats.
Gautam Saab, if I may call you that.
Just call me Gautam, yaar. Itna bada naam kya?
Chalo, Gautam.
Saab bhi laga diya aage.
I don't dye my hair, don't And just to prove a point, I don't even dye my chest hair. The other day I was asked to speak at somebody's 50th birthday. They asked me, said, Gautam, will you speak at one of my colleagues, Anil Chadda? He is now the DC, Divisional Chief Executive of ITC. And he and I have worked together for many years. What Habib Rahman was to me, I was to Anil. He said, आप बोलोगे मैं कहाँ बोल देता हूँ. So ऐसे भी देखिए पंजाबियों का प्रॉब्लम ये होता है कि एक उनका माइलस्टोन होता है, इट्स कॉल्ड 50. एक तो पहले होता ही नहीं कोई 50. औरतें 40 नहीं होती, आदमी 50 नहीं होते. और जो 50 हो जाते हैं उनके जो 2 बटन खुल जाते हैं चेस्ट पे, और इनके सारे बाल सफेद हो जाते हैं. तो वहाँ पर हमारा भाई और जो हमारा बॉस भी है वो नक्को भी था. मैं कहा खोल भाई शर्ट, अपनी शर्ट खोल. कहता क्यों? मैं कहा खोल, सफेद. प्लस 50. एक वहाँ हमारे कॉलीग होते थे दीपक अक्सर, हमने कहा शर्ट खोलो. इसे वो कश्मीरी पंडित है, वो तो घबरा गया कि यार ये तो
जब डिनर में खाया हो मटन तो सुबह नहीं बंद होता शर्ट का बटन.
अनिल चड्डा के वो खोले, मैं कहते यार इसके भी हो गए, देखो 50 का हो गया, व्हाइट है. So then there was this great cacophony कि तुम्हारा what about you? मैं तो कहती देखो, if you are you prepared to be shocked? So they said yes, मैं तो पूरा strip tease. मैं कहा चलो black.
Fantastic. ITC से याद आया, ITC has some incredible food brands. Dampak, Bukhara are very famous globally, but one of the most underrated ones is I think Delhi Pavilion in Saket, and I have very fond memories of that place because that was one of the first 5-star hotel dining experiences that I had. I used to live in Saket earlier, and my father used to have discount coupons for Delhi Pavilion because he accumulated that through his business travels. So let's talk about Delhi Pavilion. What's the concept behind setting up this restaurant? And I or most of our listeners don't know anything about setting up a 5-star restaurant. So please walk us through how you went about setting up and conceptualizing this lovely restaurant.
I got so badly badgered on Delhi being. I'm telling you, there is a problem. And those of us who belong to Delhi, we've had to have a lot of quinine. Because every says even your weather is evolved. आपका मौसम भी इवॉल्व है. वहाँ बर्फ पड़ती है तो आप ठंडी हो जाती है. राजस्थान में गर्मी होती है, गर्मी हो जाती है. राइट. तो आपका तो और पैलेट तो बिल्कुल ही इवॉल्व है. और ये जो तहजीब वगैरह थी जो 800 साल से बरकरार थी, आप लोगों ने तो उसको बिल्कुल ही तबाही मचा दी. कैसे बचाई? बटर चिकन. मैं कहा हम मुल्तान नहीं है, हमारा खाना खाया आपने? कभी नहीं खाया. ये झंगी है, आपने इनका खाना खाया. चुप. तो वही बात हो गई. जो फरमाइशी खाना होता है वो घरों में ही रह जाता है. सो तो स्ट्रीट का खाना है वो स्ट्रीट पे मिल जाता है. फरमाइशी का मतलब food on request. If I go to Sadaf's house, he probably give me food which is not available on the street. Or I come to Archit's house, his mother or grandmother would, come up with a family recipe. जैसे हम मेहमान नवाजी करें, हम आपको अपनी बीवी पीजीदा पुलाव खिलाएंगे, हम आपको थोड़ा मोरेल्स खिलाएंगे because हमारे शिमला में रूट्स हैं, आपको थोड़ा गुच्छी खिलाएंगे, ठीक है ना, आपको हम मुकन बड़ी खिलाएंगे जो मुल्तानी लोग खाते हैं, जो आप लोग नहीं जानते. तो हमारे को चैलेंज ये था कि हम इसको कैसे डिमिस्टिफाई करें. एंड आई लाइक माय पास्ट. आई लाइक द फैक्ट that this grand public eating spheres were introduced by the Delhi Sultanate, right? And I like this entire movement of the Silsila. I have lived amongst, this culture of, and I like the food, and I like their attitude towards life, and I like, and so I said, हमको करना है ये, so I did an experiment. So I went to my boss. वो भी कह रहे थे दिल्ली का खाना तो बकवास है, क्या नरगिसी कोफ्ता, यूजलेस, क्या होता है इनका खाना, मिर्ची भर देते हैं हर चीज में, and then you made it worse, आपका बटर चिकन ये. मैं कहा यार ऐसे रहमान साहब, आपकी मैंने बहुत झोली चुक्की की है भाई. आपका खाना वाना खिलाया, आपको हमने प्रिंसेस टूरिस्ट अवार्ड से मिलवा दिया. Last Ottoman princess was married to the Nizams of Hyderabad. हमने उनको मिली. Can you imagine for a Hyderabadi to meet Princess Dureshwar? Her father Abdul was the Caliph of the Islamic world. She was married to a Hyderabadi. Can you believe it?
Oh, I didn't know that.
हाँ, और हमने बहुत बड़ी दावत थी इनके नाम पे और इज्जत अफजाई को मिला दिया. मैं कहा, now it's time, payback time. He said, what is it? I said, I want to start a branded cuisine. What do you want? I said, I want to call it Delhi. He said, go for it. बस वहां से हमने ये banquet branded cuisine, except that banquet में नहीं, मतलब कि वो तुम्हारा father जो है, तुम्हारे your dad, he couldn't redeem that because he was now going to. So therefore, when the opportunity came, I said, so Rakul, who is also was my boss and my brother, we said that we'll niche the pavilions and bring in local elements. So the Bombay Pavilion. So the time came for. So I said we'll call it the Delhi Pavilion. And I had in my back of my mind, I had started a small blog called Hindavi, which incidentally is also the name of our language. Amir Khusro ne bahut kamal ka kaam kiya. He was eccentric man, but he was quite a unique character.
Yeah.
And he probably gave us our identity and our language, and a lot of this, what they call as this Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, this amalgamation. So I had quietly, and I told the company I'm doing it. I said I'm going to do my own blog. So Hindavi had done the Kitchens of Indian History, all the work that I was now doing personally, and I was documenting it, and I was very happy to give it to ITC Hotels. So I said, look, I've done this work, and we will do this. So therefore, I told you, I apologize for the ancient. I did not know, and I'm an impatient man, and I cannot understand. So I said we'll start with the, with my understanding of the Salan. Okay, and we'll start with the Delhi Sultanate, and we bring in the Mughals because by default they were there.
Yeah.
And a lot of refinement took place. जैसे आप जानते हैं कि एक फैब्रिक होता है चिड्स, वो छेटी, उसका नाम छेटी था.
अच्छा.
And you know why? And this lady, Shah Jahan's daughter, Jahanara, amazing woman. She was a fabulous woman, handsome woman, tall, attractive, very articulate, and loved to have Shiraz wine, by the way. And she had a deal with Maharaja Sansar Chand of Kangra, okay, to send her saddle full of snow. Kangra was never annexed by the Mughals, right? And they used to ply their own ships for Hajj. They were entrepreneurs. They were women of great substance. So ये छीटी पहनती थी, okay. And you may have wondered कि भी ये इनको ये deodorize कैसे करती थी भी गर्मी तो वहाँ. They used to use rose water and vetiver. केवड़ा कहते हैं ना.
हाँ जी.
तो वो use करती थी ये. तो वो बेचारी एक दिन जा रही थी तो she got burned because there was so much of chemical in her chiti, which incidentally became chintz. Chiti. And when she got disfigured, she lost her beauty. All right, but that's not the point. So, but under her patronage, the guilds did very well. All your. In fact, I am of the opinion that this biryani, which is nothing except fried rice, was actually made by the poor people, in that part of the world. Whether it was under Bahadur Shah or later, doesn't matter. I'm just saying, so the Mughals contributed because of the great wealth that they had. Refinement, garnishes, khubsurti, all this garnishes, beauty of the mithai. Work lagta hai, gold, silver. Zakat was zakat hai. So let's give them credit for it. And so we said we'll do medieval. Then we said हम करेंगे. फिर वो अंग्रेज आ गए. फिर वो न्यू दिल्ली हो गया. अब न्यू दिल्ली में तो अंग्रेजों ने सब कुछ अपना डाल दिया. अब जैसे हमको भी हमारे parents have a little bias towards Western food. But for them, Western food was damn very English food,
Yeah.
आज क्या खाएंगे? Today we'll have stew, or we'll have fried fish, or we'll have roast chicken, or we'll have, you know, and we have some by default. My father was the steward of the Green Room Club in Simla. उनका तो एक तो पूरा पूरा सूट वूट पहन के जाना पड़ता है गर्मी में भी, ठीक है, और हैट पैट भी पहन लेते हैं, स्मोकिंग रूम भी है जहाँ औरतें नहीं जा सकती, आदमी जा सकते, सब ड्रकोनियन, उनका खाना भी वैसा ही है. And so did the club, by the way. So we were members of the NSCI here, and the food was all Western food.
Yeah.
So the English, so New Delhi then became the epitome of what we call as the Anglo hegemony on our food, right?
Yeah.
Now, and then of course came what we call as, so they ran, they fortunately only 100 years, but they inflicted enough damage because it really became a wasteland for Indian food evolution. It went back into the homes. It went back into घरों में चला गया. भाई बाजार में ये अंग्रेज तंग करेंगे हमें. So some rakabdars even converted the do pyaza into ishtu. So salan is the same thing as do pyaza, and pyaza is the same thing as ishtu.
Okay.
So the rakabdars tried their best to anglicize their food so that it's acceptable to white. भाई वो स्टू भेजो, हाँ जी स्टू. तो दो प्याजा का मतलब हमारे हिंदुस्तानी में उसका मतलब होता है बरकत, और ईरानी को बोलो, पर्शियन को बोलो, तो वो तो लकीर के फकीर हैं, वो तो दो प्याज ही डालते हैं. Onion is native to Iran and West Punjab. वेस्ट पंजाब वाले तो बहुत प्याज डालते हैं, बरकत हो, खूब जी हो ना, 1 किलो मीट हो तो 1 किलो. Doesn't matter whether you're Muslim or Hindu or Sikh. We have a common culinary history. Yeah. So the Iranians didn't like all this. They saw another nation emerging. So they made sure that the differences became sharper. So their do pyada is 2 onions. Our do pyada is... So इन्होंने जो ट्राई किया, चाहे वो करीम था, चाहे जवाहर था, जिसने भी कोशिश की, जो successfully or unsuccessfully tried to anglicize, but education was an issue with the rakabdar. So they were able to at best come up with ishtu. Then we called instead of calling it refugee Delhi, I called it sanctuary Delhi. So हो गया आपका early medieval हो गया, later medieval हो गया, न्यू दिल्ली हो गया, ठीक है, आ गया अंग्रेजी खाना वाना, फिर आपका सेंचुरी आ. खाली हम पंजाबी इतने डोमिनेटिंग हैं, वो बंगाली भी आ गए थे. हमारी स्कूल में मिसेस पद्मनाभन वो भी आ गई. उनको हम कहते हैं नहीं, दे डोंट कम, बट ऑफ कोर्स राइट, यूपी वाले भी आ गए थे, कई तरह के लोग आ गए थे, तो दे ब्रॉट देयर ओन. तो हमने कहा भी सेंचुरी करेंगे, और ये रेफ्यूजी वैसी क्या करना चाहिए. It's such a apologetic word.
Yeah.
So we said sanctuary.
Yeah.
Mrs. Dixit arrived on the scene, and she introduced something known as the metro, right? And then it became what we call the national capital region.
Yeah.
So what unified this was the metro, right? And that is where Sadaf's, his anguish. So I said, I give up. I don't know very much about this national capital region food. So I asked one of my colleagues, Rajdeep Kapoor, I said, who is the chef of the ITC Hotels, I said, Rajdeep, तुम इसको संभालो, जाओ घूम फिर के आओ, क्या होता है. तो वो ये सब निकल आया, मोमो, पिज्जा, ये वो, some Lucy burger, mummy, daddy, सब कुछ उधर से निकल आया. Do I like it? Why not? If there's a customer for it, I have no issues with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we stratified the Delhi Pavilion, and we said we'll call it the Delhi Pavilion because that is the. It's very confusing. नाम क्या है Delhi? ये राजा दिल्लू पे है, ये दहलीज है, या दिल्ली का है. दिल्ली है दिल्ली है कि क्या है?
Indraprastha. You're missing the Indraprastha.
हैं? हाँ,
You're
नहीं,
missing
हाँ, देखो,
Indraprastha.
अब इंद्रप्रस्थ है कुछ, तो हस्तिनापुर है, ये है, वो है। तो हमने कहा कि नहीं है, ये दिल्ली जो है ये बहुत अच्छा, I like, it's a strong name, right? And by the time the government had decided that we will now be called the Delhi National Capital Region.
Correct.
So that became an acceptable norm. So my logic was, let's piggyback on an established brand name. And let's call it the Delhi Pavilion. The fault lines, unfortunately, basis this was that we should have prefixed our food with Delhi, which I went yesterday to explain to them once again, that we should call it the Delhi biryani, like we did with the dum pork biryani.
Yeah.
And we should
Correct.
do the Delhi kebab. And in fact, yesterday we tried out a fabulous tikka. It's called the Nagpal tikka. So one of the foraging that my father did, loved eating, like I'm sure yours, was to discover, because he had a central office in Connaught Place, in Allenbury, that your father may know. Allenbury's was a well-known center for excellence for automobile engineering. He would go to Nagpal. Nagpal was a shambling man, 6'3", Peshawari, anybody, vacha, surma papu ke aa janda, surma, te akka surma pa ke, hatta mundra laga ke. He had a poetic sense of man. And he would say कि मैं कबाब सीख हूँ, मैं कबाब सीख हूँ, जब एक पहलू झुलस जाता है दूसरा पहलू बदल देता है. I am like a Sikh kebab. I turn. Okay, and he did not adopt the tandoor. He was cooking on the bhatti or the grill.
Yeah, Sigri.
So he would make this beautiful poti tikka, we used to call it. And so we recreated it. So whenever you want to, both of you can try this fantastic double marinated poti tikka without any tenderizer. So we tried Nagpal poti tikka. In fact, I wrote about it in a piece on Mrs. Gandhi, because he had the pleasure of being invited those days to her house, where he made the poti tikka. Delicious.
How was the food served there?
Yesterday?
No, how was the food served at Mrs. Gandhi's house?
Yeah, so Mrs. Gandhi she was slightly partial towards Western food, okay? But she also had a weakness for gucci var. Gucci var is, the Kashmiris do a sort of like an Indian risotto. They break the rice. Basmati. They are like their own small grain rice. So gucci var, she liked that. And but more than that, she's very elegant. So her table settings were very elegant. And I had the pleasure of, my mother was a teacher at Mrs. Gautam's, and Mrs. Gandhi was a frequent visitor. And Sheila Bhagat, who was the secretary, was a co-teacher at Mrs. Gautam's, and she was designated as the cultural secretary to Mrs. Gandhi for many years. And so I can't claim to know her very well, but my mother did. And she'd been invited a couple of times for one of her tables. So, and she liked cheese souffle. She seemed to like pudding. She liked gucci var. And on one particular occasion, Sheila ji had invited, talking about Sheila Bhagat, had invited Mr. Nagpal to do the boti tikka, and she loved it.
Wow.
So I suppose, but she had a simple bent of mind. I think dal chawal.
Dal chawal all the way.
I think I would call it dal khushka.
Khushka, हाँ. काफी आप खुशका ही बोलते हैं. I don't know, somebody recently मतलब last year, someone mentioned about khushka, and then I was reminded कि khushka तो हमारे यहाँ जिसको पलेथन बोलते हैं, जब आप रोटी बेलते हैं तो जो एक्स्ट्रा जब आटा डस्ट करते हैं तो उसको भी खुश्का बोलते हैं. मतलब खुश्क से बड़ा है खुश्क, सूखना. तो उसके ऊपर थोड़ा डस्ट कर दिया आटा तो खुश्कन या फिर पलेथा क्या कहते हैं. तो आई वाज लाइक कोई कनेक्शन है. खैर, एक बिकॉज यू मेंशन्ड अबाउट हाउ पवेलियन फूड चेंज्ड ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, and that reminds me that in the modern times, when I'm saying modern times, even though not a modern history, so to speak, but modern times, जबकि एक नया influx आया, there's new wave, so to speak, of food people. Now, the reason of calling them a food people, because these are not chefs, not influencers, not historians, but there's entire consumer, but there's the entire ecosystem, right, where you have different people playing their part. तो आपके पास शेफ भी हैं, influencers हैं, वो भी हैं, जो फूड राइटर्स हैं, जो कंसल्टेंट हैं, जो उगा रहे हैं, तो अब ऑर्गेनिक फूड भी वापस आता, एंड देन द मॉडर्न शेफ who are thinking differently a little, कि अच्छा इसको ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं, इसको ऐसे भी कर सकते हैं.
I forgot that. So there's another era that I could not understand very well. I think Anil Chadda understood it more. The modern Indian, modern Delhi cuisine.
Correct. Modern Indian.
Sorry.
So that's exactly what I think. But how is because you gave us that picture, right? Ki how food at Pavilion, and if I can take the liberty of saying maybe that's how food of Delhi also kept on changing. तो अभी का जो खाना हम खा रहे हैं उसमें इन लोगों का कितना भागीदारी है, या फिर how much they influence the food that we eat now as a Hindustani khana of modern times?
Yeah, so I think there was a flux. So there was a graveyard of evolved tastes and flavors, and but fortunately, I think what's happening is that the younger generation are rediscovering their palates.
Yeah.
And, so thankfully, so and I think we must give credit to biryani. I think today the biggest unifier in the national capital region, apart from of course the momos and the dim sum and whatever, thupka or whatever, is the biryani. I think biryani has unified us, as Delhi people or the capital region. Okay, so you find that is one very strong binding, and I don't know anybody who does not eat or like to eat biryani.
We know two people.
You don't like biryani?
We know two people who don't like biryani. Well, they were also vegetarians. Yeah. So in the difference,
that doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
I'm saying वो भी उनके लिए भी हम बनवा देंगे. अगर आप सब्ज का यखनी बनाएं तो वो भी बहुत अच्छा जायकेदार होता है. जैसे हम खाते हैं, हमको कहा गया अभी आप लोग बहुत मीट खाते हैं, तो हमें भी समझाया था अभी मंगलवार को नहीं खाना चाहिए. तो मटरों का चावल बनता है और वो बहुत अच्छा बनता है. मटर का चावल, उसकी करी सब्जियों की यखनी बन जाती है, और अच्छे मटर, मीठे मटर, अच्छा चावल, उसमें अच्छा बघार होता है. साथ में आप उसमें कुछ बैंगन जो भी साथ में, it's possible. It's 24 hours is not bad. Plus it's good. Abstinence is good. So I think that is what has happened. Fortunately, I think so all this rubbish that was imposed on us, this paneer jalfrezi and Punjabi food, all that crap. And I think people, and thankfully the COVID has gone and destroyed, the low cost carriers, all this. And I think a lot of young people do realize the price points, are good things. If they charge better, then it's better. And one of the successes of that is Vengas. I mean, the whole world and their auntie, they could come from Ghaziabad or Shahadara or wherever, but they all come to Vengas. Let me tell you, Vengas is not doing paneer Manchurian or butter chicken, or they may have compromised one or two things, but otherwise their menu remains. I mean, their chicken patties still use bechamel, their chicken sandwiches still don't use mayonnaise, right? So I think that's a good example of a renaissance.
Yeah.
And I think the cyber hub here in Gurgaon has also been responsible for creating an eating renaissance. And people are eating at, whether we like it or not, at Haldiram and at Bikaner, and in Gurgaon where I live right now, there's Home Sweets, which is rocking and rolling.
Yeah.
So yes, so I think people are liking to eat their traditional food that their parents or their grandparents did, right? So I'm not saying that the market for that other fly-by night is gone. I don't even know what young people eat there, but I think there has been a tremendous comeback, and we see that the success rates of restaurants, let's say in ITC hotels, at least I can talk with some wisdom, that the cash register is growing exponentially.
Yeah. I think we have
gone up even further.
Yeah.
And
we
with
have
the
rediscovered our food. थोड़ा कहीं दूर हो गए थे, वापस मिल गया है हमें खाना.
Would you say that, say 10-15 years back, 5-star dining was the pinnacle of restaurant dining, but now that's changing with so many excellent restaurants, standalone restaurants coming up? I can think of Jamun in Delhi, Yum Yum Cha. You gave a couple of examples.
I am not going to get myself into any form of trouble. All I'm saying is quality for me is top down. Contrarian to what's happening in Europe and America, where it's bottom up. I think it's top down. Brands which have excelled and not on attrition, not sacked their people indiscriminately during the COVID crisis, have not compromised on their ingredients and their processes. And I'll tell you, what is the trick? The trick is to experience a distress-less aftermath of a well-cooked meal. Simple as that. And I think that is what's happening. So the success of, and including Yum Yum Cha, or for that matter, I think Gourmands is a fabulous restaurant. And for me, it's a place to go to all the time. And I'm not plugging Gourmands because they charge me, unfortunately. But I think they do fabulous quality. All right. So, and I know of other, and there's another place here close by called China Club, which is expensive as hell, but it's fabulous. And in Delhi, there are, for instance, Press. That's fantastic food. It's expensive, and Julia is a lovely lady. But I think so. Lots of people are doing a lot of good quality food, and it's not hybrid. I think that hybrid, there will be a community of evolving children who are in college. They have a lack of propensity. They will eat on the street. But I think that we were probably 2080. We were a graveyard 10 years ago. Everybody was experimenting. Nothing. There was no Indian restaurant in the national capital region. There was not a single Indian restaurant. The hapless Bukhara and Dampuk were the only two remaining Indian restaurants. Everybody else has closed down. And of course, what kept it alive was Pandara Road. The cash registers in Pandara Road kept going. The cash registers in Nizamuddin kept going, or in Old Delhi kept going. People were still having that fried chicken, that korma, and the biryani, and whatever else. So depending on where the Agarwals were still having, paras and kachoris or whatever else, right? And so therefore, I think we've kept alive this 800 years or 900 years of food, right, in some pockets or the other, right? And would I pay a premium to go and eat at? Of course I would. I would certainly pay, not because I'm of any privileged position or I have extra, but that's what life is all about. Life is top down, right? And if these restaurants that we are talking about were able to maintain the sanctity of their price points and the quality and kindness. I attribute restaurants to kindness, which is one aspect. And of course, there is the other unmentionable word, which I can't use in public television, is what you probably do is Tinder. That the connection. My obtuse fashion called hope. There's these places also invoke hope. Can we meet somebody else? Will we meet somebody? So I think, and I think that a lot of these menus that I've been seeing recently, I used to just tell my children or my nephews, I said, "Aap decide kar lo, card mere se le lo, aap lijiye, please keep my card. This is my pin. You order whatever you." I'm very
हाँ.
इत्थे भी उत्थे भी आगे पीछे भाई आप जो मर्जी खाओ मुझे इतना सा दे दो मैं इतना सा नहीं हूँ लेकिन आप so I think many menus are now getting stratified. I think they are maturing into eating Indian food.
Yeah. No, I
Not
think
eating they like to eat for the Chinese food. I think it's notwithstanding all the problem that we have with them. A lot of these restaurants do fabulous Chinese food or Asian food, French food, or Western food, or for instance, confectionery is doing so well, and niche products like our kitchens. I think qualitatively, never in the history of Delhi have we had a superior competitive advantage over many cities in Asia.
Yeah.
yeah.
On that lovely note, let's take a tiny break. Sadaf, immediately.
Yes. 3, 2, 1, back. And we are.
Sadaf, why
back.
were you opening your button? Was it because your shirt button? Because you also are claiming to be plus 50, or
He is inspired by your story.
दिल से तो 50 का ही हूँ, शक्ल से भले ही लगता हूँ, दिल से तो 50 हूँ. So now our favorite segment and last segment as well, which is on what the last part that you mentioned about, which was how now you just like order anything, here's the card, take it and order. That is our, so to speak, the last segment as well, which is your favorite over the period of time. Apart, of course, you've already mentioned about biryani, how it has worked as unifier. But beyond that, if you have to pick one favorite dish, it could be any part of India or Delhi itself.
for me, to go for the biryani for me is supremely God's own gift to India.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Whatever, I'm telling you, चाहे वो ये जो उल्फत का रिश्ता है, उसमें हमने कुछ छोटा सा आपको सुनाए 5 मिनट की है, जिसकी खुशबू से भी उठ जाए फिजा, जिसकी खुशबू से भी उठ जाए फिजा, जिसकी रंगत से भी आ जाए मजा, और लजीज और नफीस हर लुकमा, जिसका जायका हो एक दूजे से जुदा, जिसको खा के खुश हो जाए मेहमान, बिछाते हैं हम वही हिंदुस्तान की बिरयानी का दस्तरखान. तो बिरयानी जो है ये कमाल की चीज, और इसके वेरिएशंस हैं, कोई कच्ची है, कोई ये है, कोई ये है, वो समझ रहे हैं हम समझते हैं. और उसकी जो देन है वो दिल्ली की देन है. और वो कराची वाला कहेगा हमने बनाया, सिंधी कहता है मैं नहीं देता, यार शट अप, डोंट वेस्ट माय ब्रेक टाइम. सिंपल है. Persian is the official language of the Mughal court. बिरयान का मतलब फ्राइड राइस है. गरीब लोग खाते थे. अमीरों का असूल है कि गरीबों का खाना उठा के अपना बना लेते हैं. और अमीरों का असूल ये भी है कि अपना खाना छुपा के रखते हैं, गरीबों को नहीं खिलाते. समझ गए? तो बिरयानी जो है बेगम साहिबा ने उठाई कि यार ये तो बहुत कमाल का है खाना है. उसको रिफाइनमेंट की, चावल वावल अच्छा डाला. तो वारिस शाह एक हमारे पंजाबी के एक पोएट हैं
जी,
आप पढ़िए किस्सा वारिस शाह. उन्होंने 6 किस्म की चावल लिखे हैं उसमें
जी.
हर किस्म का मकसद, हीर की शादी हो रही है, निकाह हो रहा है,
they have the basmati there.
हाँ, हास्की है, सतारा है, खिचड़ी वास्ते ऐ, पुलाव वास्ते है. तो I'm not saying कि क्या फ्रिक चावल. I'm saying it is spiritual grain of India.
Lovely.
True.
Beautifully put. Where would you get the best biryani in Delhi if you had to go out?
मेरे घर पे.
Delhi Pavilion. Trust me.
Delhi Pavilion.
I'm saying, I'm not. Please, I'm an ITC guy. I worked 10 years of my career in ITC Moria. I love Dampo, everything and all that, and I don't want to be disloyal to 10 years of my life. But I think Delhi Pavilion की जो दहलनवी बिरयानी है, सराय की बिरयानी, पब्लिक बिरयानी, सारे मतलब सारा इज मेंट फॉर आम आदमी बिरयानी। तो क्या बना, yesterday we had, so I had a group of friends from all over the world and they sent me a special request कि भैया हमें वहाँ ही जाना है।
वाह।
Cairo City में रह रहे थे because they have a connecting flight to Dubai, but they only requested कि यार गौतम वहाँ हमको खिला दो थोड़ा। तो हमने उनको बीबी का पुलाव भी खिलाया और दहल में भी बिरयानी भी खिलाई।
लवली।
और सिलवट्टे के शामी भी खिलाए और दही के कबाब भी खिलाए और नागपाल टिक्का भी खिलाया और फालूदा भी खिलवाया और होममेड गुलाब की आइसक्रीम भी खिलाई, होम चर्न।
वाह वाह,
भूख लग गई
लंच टाइम।
अब खाइए, अब अंडररेटेड है, as you know, as you rightly said, Archit, because दमपुख्त बिरयानी is like aspirational and bragging rights होते हैं। देखो ऐसा है, खाने पीने में भी ब्रैगिंग राइट्स होते हैं भाई।
बिल्कुल।
हमें बुलाएंगे, हम इनको टैग वैग करेंगे, यार हमको इन्होंने दावत तो बुलाया, हमारे
तो बुलाना ही पड़े।
हमारे जैसे नाचीज ने को भी सादाफ मियां ने बुलाया, अपनी बिरयानी खिलाई, ये खिलाया वो खिलाया, ऐसे वो कह रहे हैं ना हमारे घर में। और बिल्कुल सही
अब तो।
और हमारा हैदराबाद में यही प्रॉब्लम होता था कि हमने रात को वहाँ मिडनाइट बिरयानी लगा, अगर दिन में करते तो हम तो लिंच हो जाते। रोशनारा कहती भी मेरी बिरयानी, वो कहती है अपनी अपनी बिल्किस कहती कि मेरी बिरयानी। हमने तो मिडनाइट में लगा दी यार, हम भी सो जाएं आप भी सो जाएं। बेगम साहिबा जो मतलब के रातों के राजे होते हैं वो आके खाएंगे, वो बरकत है उसमें, दबा के खाइए, 100-150 रुपए दीजिए, दबा दबा के। तो उसमें बहुत बरकत होगा, उसमें बताऊं आपको, डेग में बरकत होती, खत्म ही नहीं होता। तो आईटीसी का खाना कभी क्यों नहीं खत्म होता। अब आप जाएंगे किसी दावत में, जाए आईटीसी, book a banquet in ITC, right? The food never finishes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the food has a bottomless cup, and especially biryani. So I'm coming back to my favorite food. Sorry, I'm a party pooper.
No.
We all love biryani.
I have a second. I can give you a second favorite.
Which is
biryani.
Totally. What would be one underrated dish?
Pulao.
Oh.
Because I'll tell you, and there's a difference. There's a very sharp difference. So, if you look at biryani, and I go back to the synthesis of what a lot of people, including your friend, who I love, Rana, very much. Please don't, no disrespect, man, but she and I had a little bantering on this. So I said, ऐसा है कि आपके भी ढाबे में बिरयानी मिलती है, आपके घर में क्या मिलता है? कहता पुलाव। तो इसमें क्लास क्राइसिस है। पुलाव जो है वो क्लास क्राइसिस है कि हमने किसी को दिया नहीं, हम ही हैं जो लिखते हैं और दोनों दे देते हैं दुनिया को, हमको शर्म नहीं आती। तो यखनी जो है, द ट्रिक ऑफ पुलाव इज द यखनी सूप। Okay, and the trick of the biryani is what we call as Maillard reaction. Maillard means browning.
Yeah, correct.
ये जो बिरयानी होती है वो थोड़ी ब्राउन होती और यखनी होती थोड़ी सफेद होती है। एक्सेप्ट आईटीसी, और ये किसी को कहने की बात तो नहीं है कि जो आईटीसी की जो बिरयानी है वो हाइब्रिड है। उसमें दोनों है, दैट्स व्हाई इट्स सो यूनिक।
करेक्ट
यखनी भी है और उसमें फ्राइंग भी है। तो पुलाव आई थिंक इज अंडररेटेड, बट आई थिंक there's an opportunity for us to expose it, and but I'm trying.
No, I totally think that and काफी लोग को ना ये लगता है कि बिरयानी जो है डिफिकल्ट है, and when I say बिरयानी easier है as compared to पुलाव, क्योंकि बिरयानी में क्या है कि आपको पानी जो आपने बहा दिया, जो उसका जो यखनी बोलिए चावल, लेकिन पुलाव में इतना ही रखना है कि वो सोख ले और फिर भी दाना खिला दे। तो आई थिंक ट्रिक जो है पुलाव में,
और चावल को 6 बारी नहलाओ, धोइए ठंडे पानी में, वेरी डिफिकल्ट।
ट्रिक जो है पुलाव में, पुलाव, एंड इफ आई कैन ऐड जस्ट टेकिंग द लिबर्टी ऑफ जर्दे में भी जो आई थिंक काफी लोग मीठा चावल बनाते हैं उसको, लेकिन जर्दा
मैं आपको तीसरा एक बता देता हूँ जो आप सब जानते होंगे, व्हिच आई लव, इट्स कॉल्ड चुलाव। अब चुलाव में क्या होता है? चावल, देसी घी और ये लौंग। अरे खा के देखिए, माय गॉड, आप मंगलवार को
हाँ.
अब हम तो बेशरम है, हम तो खा लेते, पर वो पुलाव खाइए आप, माय गॉड, साथ में खट्टी दाल खाइए, क्या.
ओह, घी तो हमारा फेवरेट आइटम है.
Lovely.
And overrated. One dish which is absolutely overrated.
Overrated, overweighted.
Overrated.
I hate to say it, butter chicken. Please don't.
After taking all the praises for butter chicken.
No, I tell you what I like about butter chicken. It's flying.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you know this, but the Lufthansa and the KLM crew stay at the Sheraton in Delhi,
Mhm.
and they have a program to order. So either they go to Dakshin or they go
Yeah.
to Delhi Pavilion. They know what. So they order butter chicken and they order butter naan. That's another big export. That butter naan or the garlic naan.
Yeah.
Garlic naan, butter naan, the
Yeah.
butter chicken.
Yeah.
They rock by flight. And I asked them one day, so I share during the damn bloody COVID thing, I went and checked in there after getting my rapid antigen test and RT-PCR. Anyway, I have a home in Delhi, but I went and checked in there, so we were sharing a lounge. So they said, but we should not eat any Chinese food. So I said, but why, Fraulein? They said, no, we should not have any Chinese food. We've been told we can't eat Chinese food. I said, yeah. He says, I said, where do you eat? He says, we like the Dakshin and we like the Delhi Pavilion. I said, what do you eat there? The butter chicken. So I personally don't like it because बहुत गड़बड़ करते हैं, कोई मीठा, कोई खट्टा, there's no sanitization. Who is making the nice one? I don't. I remember going to Motival with my grandfather because he was Diwan Sahab and he was highly respected. And Diwan Sahab had a studi breaker, so when he arrived in Daryaganj, there was this great cacophony of sound and explosion. Plus, he used to wear a three-piece suit and a hat even in the summer. So the owner would be very deferential, Rai Sahab, Jai Babu Sahab, Diwan, Diwan. And we liked the butter chicken then because it was sweet and sour. Okay. So sometimes they make it very sweet and sometimes they make it very sour. I don't know. It's confusing. And sometimes they blanch the chicken and make it. So so I think process में problem है.
Yeah.
So I think बड़ा overrated इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ because somebody should come and standardize it and if you ask me, I wouldn't order it.
Nice. That
makes sense.
We will settle on biryani.
Yeah. On that lovely note, it was an absolute honor to have you on the show, Gautam. बहुत मजा आया हमें, and hopefully listeners को भी मजा आएगा, I'm sure. So thank you.
And of course, celebrate our 1 year.
Yeah.
So it's absolute honor to celebrate 1 year of Naan Curry
Congratulations
podcast.
to you, Archit, I think for being a pioneer, an entrepreneur and a pioneer, and Sadaf for being so brave.
Shukriya.
Thank you.
That eatery in Dwarka, you said?
Where again? No, I was in Rohini.
Rohini. So you gave up that eatery and then you struck out on your own and you do food which is not very glamorous. And I keep seeing your posts and you're not dropping names. But once in a while, थोड़ा name dropping कर लेना चाहिए.
आपका करेंगे ना?
अपनी बिरयानी अपना चलाओ थोड़ा आप लोगों की between you and me बहुत अच्छी विरासत है आप लोग. हम बहुत जानते हैं हमारे जो पुराने दोस्त हैं निजामुद्दीन, हमें भी तक वो खाना वाना भेजते रहते हैं. हमारे बहुत दोस्त हैं. और उस दिन हमारी एक साहिबा है, बहुत अच्छी हमारी दोस्त सबिया उसका नाम. She sent me mahin keema with हरी मिर्च. क्या है?
Oh.
My hands were smelling for 3 days. क्या आप लोग अपना रखो यार थोड़ा. And I'll tell you what, the time is now come to understand that people would like to go back to responsible luxury spaces.
Yeah. True.
खिचड़ी विचड़ी खाने के लिए कोई नहीं जाएगा.
कहाँ
One irritating chef, we said, sir, I want to do mother's home cooking. I said, that's where she should be, in your home cooking, not in my kitchen.
But people are bringing back the home food now, which is.
What about hygiene?
No, I'm saying people are bringing back that.
I'm saying, yeah, घर में खाना. Who's going to check their hygiene levels? Who's doing the swab testing?
Yeah.
Correct.
Are they following HACCP standard? Where are they buying their ingredients from? I refuse to. Look, I am not going to be the victim of some housewife's bad hygiene management. You understand?
Yeah.
For me, it's very important to understand the credentials of who's cooking.
Correct. On that food note, मेरे को बड़ी भूख लग गई है. करते हैं आज की दुकान.
आपको
बिरयानी खाएंगे हम तो, बटर चिकन नहीं. On that note, करते हैं दुकान बंद.